Hello, I'm David D. Cosbo. Welcome to ECTV Live. My cohort Rusty Fender is off today, but we have another exciting program and one that has become traditional as the fall season comes upon us. Julie Esty joins us, and Julie is with a group called the Dearly Departed Players. At this time of year, it's not unusual for various organizations to hold tours of local cemeteries, local haunts, if you will. Often, even when they have a historic trend to them, they also weave in some ghostly stories. Well, in this case, Julie Esty and the Dearly Departed Players have been going through the Dunmore Cemetery for several years now. We'll establish just how many. And actually, they research some of the folks who are buried there, and then in period costume, tell their story to those of you who visit. So, Julie, first of all, how many years has it been?
This will be my 21st year. The players, for the majority of the players, it will be 15 years for them. I was out there alone by myself, alone for a while, and then the players came along. So we're there a good long time.
Right. Now, you don't do the ghostly image type thing, per se.
No, we do not. It is a historical tour. Everyone on the tour is researched. They are accurate stories of their lives, a moment in their lives, something interesting that happened to them along the road of life, and we bring that moment back.
And you have the group hosts these tours. You have, I believe, 2 dates?
Yes, we do. October 7th and the 14th, and the tours begin promptly at 2. Folks should really arrive a little early now for parking and to see our exhibits, but the tours start promptly at 2 p.m.
And this is a walk-through type of a tour, so you'll go from one site in the cemetery to another.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
I'm curious as to how you actually got started on this, because it's not the kind of thing, I guess if you were to go to any cemetery, perhaps you'd see a particular name that sticks out in your mind because it's the same name as a local community, or you tie it with your own family or something. But to be able to think of the idea of, well, let's find a number of them, let's find a common theme among those that we're looking at, and then say, all right, let's put on remember the old Mickey Rooney, Andrew Hardy thing, let's put on a play. Well, that in essence, that's what you're doing.
That's what happened.
Putting on a play. How did you start it?
I've been in the Dunmore Cemetery for most of my life. I was out there, in my high school years because that's the way we used to get to the football games. Then I photographed it extensively back in the 80s when I had my own dark room. And then I started to do the historical interpreter thing in the early 1990s. And I was out there doing tours. At the time, the Lackawanna Historical Society did tours that were much smaller. Okay. And eventually they opted to not have it as part of their programming, and I just took it over. And from this, we've ballooned into this huge historical event.
You are, in essence, walking into this cemetery, well, walking into any cemetery, you're actually walking into a history book.
Yes, yes. Every cemetery basically is not just a history book, it's a science book. It's a book on architecture, art. They're open-air museums and very community-friendly places if you use them right.
And you always pick a theme. So now you've not only got to find particular deceased that fit that theme, but you've got to have enough, obviously, to make it worthwhile for people to come and enjoy the presentation. What's this year's theme?
I didn't, usually I title it. This year I didn't. There are 2 themes going on with this tour. One is that everything has happened before. We think that everything that's happened to us is new, but it's not. Everything has happened before, accidents, unfortunately to say, things like terrorism, things like, you see the recalls on lettuce and vegetables and things like that. Mm-hmm. That is something that is not new, that has happened before. We also have very nice warnings. Let's say life's lessons. We have a group of gentlemen on the tour that are going to explain what you need to do in case there's a bad storm, an electrical storm, and of course with the way our weather has been lately, very basic things that a lot of people don't realize. You know, we talk about how many people have gotten injured or killed in household accidents. And most people are motoring along through their day, and you don't realize, like, something very simple at home could kill you. Another warning that we have on this tour is how technology is taking away from this going on up here. So some of the things we did in the past, we really need to continue to use because it keeps our brains, this computer, going.
It reminds me, actually, I was on a trip just a week ago, and at a local restaurant heard a conversation from a family sitting next to us, and I don't know how they got involved in this conversation, but they had a little boy with them, probably 6 or 7 years old, and somebody in the group, one of the adults mentioned something about a rotary phone, and the kid's face turned, what on earth is that?
We've had that with one of my cast members, Wendy Belaski. We do a historical funeral memorabilia exhibit that we travel with, and we actually have a rotary phone because back in the day they used to give you the little dial thing to go around, and the funeral homes would have their phone numbers on it. Well, now when we take the rotary phone out, children do come up, and we have to show them how to use a rotary phone.
Actually, I go back to that. I go back before that. I remember the phone where you'd pick it up and operator would say, "Number, please," and you'd give them the number, sure. To give folks an idea as to what they might expect, because I don't want to give away all that you're going to be doing this year, let's go back a year or two or three or four and give us an example of one or two things that you've uncovered that perhaps are a little bit out of the norm for a particular grave. They see a particular name, and yet you know that something unusual happened to that person.
Years ago, we did the criminal intent tour, and we covered people who committed crimes, people who went to prison, people who were executed for their crimes. And one thing that we found out doing that tour was that many people did not realize that there were people who committed crimes buried in cemeteries. It's like, what do you think? Like, you know, if they die while they're incarcerated, we just lob them off the face of the earth. People who committed crimes are just like everyone else.
No, but
they have to be buried somewhere.
But it does remind me that one of America's most infamous stories involving Salem, the Salem witch trials, no one knows where those people executed were buried. There's one we believe we know, because they were considered to be witches, and they were not afforded a normal burial.
Right.
Now, of course, that would have changed, as you point out, as we got into the 1700s, or certainly the 1800s, and yet, yes, you'd see a grave there, but I wouldn't even think of the possibility that person was executed.
In the end, David, we all get the same 6 feet of dirt. You know, so you can be next to someone who committed a horrific crime or whatever, and death is the great equalizer. Bottom line.
Yeah.
So, you know, for your price of a cemetery plot, you too can be laying next to someone who did something, or you could be next to someone who did something amazing on the stage, like Marie Wainwright. You know, she is out in the Dunmore Cemetery. She played the stage with Edwin Booth, very well-known Shakespearean actress. You know, again, death is the great equalizer. So
and she was a local person?
She had local ties, yes, she did. And Bertha Galland is also in the Dunmore Cemetery. She was also a wonderful stage actress back in the day, and she is buried in the Dunmore Cemetery.
Now, do you wind up going in there after this year's presentation is over and just going to a grave that you have done no research on and suddenly say, let's look into this one?
Sometimes. At this point now, I have 20, 30 years of research in file cabinets, so that's how the themes come along. You know, you accumulate these people, like a classic example, I have folders full of ladies of the evening, working ladies, your psychic folks, just different things that have caught my eye over the year. But yes, sometimes I do go into the cemetery and work it that way. I have people contacting me all the time. It's amazing how different stories just happen to turn up. In fact, one of them the other day, and I added an addendum onto one of our talks, is about a man who is, in the scheme of things, a newer arrival to the Dunmore Cemetery, but he was a member of Merrill's Marauders in World War II, and they just celebrated their last, or observed their last reunion, because of course the members of Merrill's Marauders are getting up in years.
Sure.
They're all in their late 90s, so I thought we really needed to acknowledge. I knew he was out there. I have yet to put him on a tour because he is somewhat of a new arrival, but I do feel that this year we need to acknowledge him since those gentlemen are answering their final call.
One of the things that I was very impressed with, and we only chatted for a few moments before we went on the air, but as I said and you agreed, the cemetery is like walking into history. And I think it's vital that the kids learn about some of this history. And I know that in addition to your regularly scheduled tours this year, you're making an effort to make sure that these stories reach our young folks. Would you explain just how you're doing that, how that'll work?
Years ago, and from time to time we still get it, teachers assign the tour as extra credit. So some years I will have students come to me with a program, and if I sign it, the kids get extra credit. But this year the Dunmore schools have reached out to us. So toward the end of October, we're going to see about 100 school children from the Dunmore School District in 2 groups, and we're going to take them through, and we're going to point out some of the things that they study, because of course, there are links to Stephen Crane. They read the Red Badge of Courage, and John Willard Wrought. We're going to take them through and point out some things that they need to know. One of them being a wonderful Dunmore School District teacher, Martha Matthews Owens, who, when years ago there was a British-based Moseley Commission that examined school curriculums, and they came here to the United States, and under Martha Matthews Owens' direction, she took Dunmore school systems to #1 in the country in musical education. So we're going to show these kids Martha, and we're just going to take them through it. So it is nice, because really cemeteries, again, they are open-air museums.
Yes, but it's not a place a youngster would normally look to do the tracing of the history.
No, they don't think about that. We've had parents and grandparents bring their children to us, and some children think that you need to be invited into a cemetery. So we invite them, and we tell them, this is what's going on, this is proper etiquette, this is how you're supposed to behave. And that's getting to be something that's lost now, because you've got soccer, you've got dance, you've got whatever. Back in my day, going to the cemetery was a normal thing. You went regularly, and I'm sure back in your day, you went regularly.
I am told, this predates me, but I am told there are times when people would actually picnic.
Oh yeah, I did. One of my cast members, Wendy, did, yes. You would take a lunch and you would go out there and you would sit there and clean up the graves. And, my mother and father would tell me about who everyone was, so I knew what was going on in the little history of my life.
Maybe in what sparked your interest initially.
Yeah.
And I think the only sad thing in one case is that I could see this being done in a lot of other cemeteries, but you need the people to get it done. First, the research, which in this case you handle.
Yeah.
But then you also want to have these thespians, because you do have, and I guess they're a volunteer staff.
The dearly departed players, all of us, we don't get paid. We're all volunteer. We've been coming back year after year. I said earlier, if we made it a business, then it would be a job. This year, we've been out there since July rehearsing. We're collecting. We don't charge an admission. Our fee last year, and we hope it's as successful this year, is a non-perishable food item for the local food pantries.
That's a great charity.
And last year it went over so well. We want to do it again this year.
That's wonderful. How do you do it in terms of the physical setup? If you're moving from spot to spot, I mean, normally if you're in a theater watching actors on the stage. They're there, and the sound is centered. But you've set it up so that everyone can conveniently move from spot to spot, and yet hear what's going on.
We do our very best. We have the best sound equipment we can have for the location we are, because there are no outlets. This year what we're moving it in is a late 1800s baby carriage, the old wicker deal, and that's got our sound system in, and that's how we get it from stop to stop.
That's pretty clever.
So we're pushing the pram this year.
Yeah. Again, the dates. And
October
times.
7th and the 14th at 2 p.m. in the Dunmore Cemetery.
Do they need to have reservations to come?
No
to this?
reservations are required. Folks should come early. They should wear comfortable shoes. We asked them to arrive early because we are going to have exhibitors there. The Carbondale and Greater Pittston Historical Societies will be there. The wonderful gentlemen from East Coast Paracon, the Sons of Union Veterans. The Rotary is going to be out there this year, so there will be people for visitors to see what they've got going on. See some exhibits, chat some folks up to find out about local organizations. And again, we have our food pantry donations going on.
And how long does the tour take?
I am going to say it's going to take about 2.5 hours, judging from what I see as far as if the weather is good, our attendance. Because actually the tour would take an hour. It's moving a crowd of 800
Sure.
people through the cemetery.
800 people.
We are seeing, over 2 Sundays, we are seeing upwards of 1,500 people if the weather is good.
That's pretty darn successful, I'd say.
Yeah, it's growing. This year, it's like an explosion. We have young filmmakers from Scranton Films working with us this year. They have been out in the cemetery with us doing commercials, doing drone footage. They're going to be there the day of the tour, filming all of this great stuff that's going on, happening in the cemetery.
You're also doing something this year, it's a little bit a different project that you're involved in, and this is a photography project?
Yeah, back in the day, I photographed extensively when film was in fashion, and then I got married and had a child, and life went on, and I got busy. And when I got back into photography, film had fallen out of fashion, and I didn't have a dark room anymore. So I've been working with a broken Nikon point and shoot, and I ended up.
Is this one of your shots?
This is one of my shots. I'm going to be exhibiting at Bar Pazzo on First Friday, October.
This is a scary shot. This is a tombstone and
that's in the
a
Dunmore
tree
Cemetery.
hanging overlooking it. So this is a ghostly image.
Yeah, we're going to have some great images of the Dunmore Cemetery and other cemeteries adorning the walls of Bar Pazzo. So if people want to join us, again, cemeteries are culturally friendly places, and we can't bring everybody in there for a First Friday event. So
Sure.
Bar Pazzo has taken it on, and we would like everybody to come over and see grave images.
It's great because it's kind of an extension of what you're
Yes.
doing, and again, it's always an October thing, and that's usually given some half decent weather. It's a pleasant time to be out, but I could see this going much further. I could see this being every weekend kind of thing, except for the investment in time and energy that you folks have to put in it. And also, like, where do you start next? What do you...
I've actually started next year. I mean, it's just a constant thing. It's a constant thing. It has to be. We're constantly evolving. We're constantly moving forward. We're constantly adding different things and trying new things. It's like spokes on a wheel. The cemetery, Dunmore is, I used to say it was Carbondale, but Dunmore is actually the center of the universe. And all these spokes come out from what's happening in this cemetery, just like from the people that are buried there.
Yeah.
This valley originated with so many of the people that are in that cemetery.
You mentioned that one of the aspects, in addition to the stories, is the architecture in a cemetery. And now that comment kind of hits in my mind now, because there are, going way back, some folks, some families went beyond just your, quote, typical gravestone, mausoleums, and yet even stones that are extremely fancy in their design. Now, most of those real artistic things really date back. And I suppose that was a matter
Yeah,
of...
we have amazing mausoleums in the Dunmore Cemetery. The stained glass windows. I mean, look inside. When you go to a cemetery, look inside. Those people wanted you to see the beautiful windows that they put inside. And at different times of the day, those windows look different from morning to noon to night. You know, when you're in a cemetery, again, it is like a book. You need to be, we need to be able to read cemeteries like you read the pages of a book. Every stone is a page. And then you have chapters on your art and your architecture.
Each life has its own
Each
history.
life.
Do I recall you telling me that there was a Confederate soldier buried?
That is in a different cemetery in the Lackawanna Valley, but yes, there was a Confederate soldier buried here in the Lackawanna Valley.
And obviously, a lot of the graves would have been in Dunmore, would be those who fought for the Union during the Civil War.
Yeah.
Because how far back does a cemetery date?
Oh, the cemetery, the first burials go back to mid to later 1800s. It's up in the quarter acre, and they're not really, Gabriel Dunning, they're not really sure exactly now where he was interred, but he's up in the quarter acre on the hill, because back then, you know, records weren't really kept.
Are you still, using the term surprised, shocked, as you find the various stories that you haven't, you know, come up with before, but you're suddenly seeing something?
Every one of them is amazing, and some of them absolutely have broken my heart, made me laugh, made me cry. I mean, everybody, you have a story, I have a story, he has a story. You know, and it's my job to find those moments, and their moments have touched my life, and the players go out and we want to touch other people's lives, or let them know that it's going to be okay. They made it, we're all going to make it.
Now, some of those stories that you have to research were probably documented to a certain extent by newspapers, but Scranton at one time had a whole lot of different newspapers. I'm wondering how available some of that information is today.
Not as much as you would think. Not as much as you would think in the way of newspapers. The information, it's everywhere, like hours and hours in different libraries, looking at different people. It's sending for information outside of this area. You know, it's not just looking here in Scranton, Pennsylvania. You know, I have information coming from the archives, I've got from the Pennsylvania State Archives. It's not just all local.
Do you get suggestions from the folks that go on the tour as to, gee, you ought to look into
Sure.
Bill Smith here or Dave Jones there?
Sure, it's really nice too when we put someone on the tour and their family members are there and they're like, where are they? We knew they were in here, but we don't know where they are. So now you're showing them where their ancestor is, and it's like, I have more information. I'm so glad you stopped me, because now I have more. Give me your address, and I will send you more information on your ancestor.
Yeah, although if one of their ancestors was one of those executed, maybe they don't want to know that.
It's always nice to have a black sheep in the family.
And you don't concentrate on ghost stories, but have you had any?
There are no ghosts in the Dunmore Cemetery, only angels.
Oh, that's very interesting. That's certainly a safe place to come then.
Yes, it is.
Well, the tour dates?
October 7th and 14th at 2 p.m.
And again, no reservations, and there's no charge involved in this. How many folks are now working with you in the dearly departed players?
We have a cast of 15. We have some tech folks that help us, and I would say that's 5 or 6. We have people that help us up the front with the exhibits. It's become we've become a family in the cemetery, and our family supports and helps us. So.
And you work hard not only to get the stories, but I believe I pointed out that you also have period costumes to fit the stories that you're presenting.
Yes, or costuming, because period costuming is very expensive, and we are out there changing behind mausoleums, and it's not like dropping it somewhere that's nice and clean or whatever. So we do our best with the costuming.
Well, I mean, it sounds like fun. In addition to being a history lesson, It sounds like a lot of fun, not only for those coming to enjoy it, but for those of you involved in making the presentation. So the only thing I can really hope is that you will not be doing a story in either Mark McGlory or I anytime soon, since you do concentrate on those that have been
Passed on.
dearly departed. So Julie Esteve, who is the chief cook and bottle washer for the dearly departed players, thank you so much for joining us again. It's always a pleasure to know that we're taking advantage of our history in such unique ways, and this is probably the best. I think it really is. Thank you so much, Mark McGlory. Thank you for keeping us in focus. And Rusty Fender will be back, I think, in 2 weeks. He'll join us. I'm David DeCosmo for ECTV Live. Till I see you again next time, here's hoping all your news is good.